So thank you for the introduction, for having me, and all of you for being here. So the paper in the talk is called Don't Take No for an Answer, and it involves an experiment with actual organ donor registrations. This is joint work with Al Roth, who most of you probably know is a Nobel laureate at Stanford. So there's already been, thanks to Mario, a motivation for why we're interested in organ donation, and I'll motivate why we're interested in organ donor registrations, which I'll define in a minute. So I'm looking at Mario showed us data from kidneys alone. I'm showing you data as of today from all organ waiting lists, and we're just over 124,000 people waiting. In 2013, almost 60,000 people were added to this list in needing an organ. And the organs that they get come from donors, and they're donors of two varieties. They're living donors. Living donors provide, almost all of them provide a kidney. So you probably got the sense from Mario talking about the sale of kidneys, but if you're as healthy as you look, you have two kidneys and can live a healthy life with just one, that other kidney can be given and transplanted to somebody else. Either in Iran, you can sell that kidney, or the kidney, you can get compensated for giving that kidney. In the US, you cannot. So these are donations where your kidney is given to someone, usually a friend or a family member. The other set of donors are deceased donors, people who die in a way that their organs are still viable and can be removed and transplanted and put into other people's bodies. And they make up the majority of donors, and they made up the majority of donors in 2013. And while the living donors can give a kidney, deceased donors can give both kidneys and a heart, and in certain circumstances, lungs and intestine, other body parts. And so the vast majority of transplants actually come from the deceased donors. So I want to point out something. So in 2013, there was almost 30,000 transplants, and there were almost 60,000 people added to the list. The waiting list does not grow by 30,000 for a reason that Mario noted before, that people come off the waiting list for the wrong reasons. They come off because they die or they become too sick to transplant. So this is sort of a serious problem that is getting worse over time. And we think that there's a big opportunity for these deceased donors, not just because there's more of them and they make up the vast majority of organ transplants, but also that the rate at which people have consented to be an organ donor while they're alive is still below 50%. It's 48 as of the last measurement. I actually think that this number might be an overestimate, because the number is calculated by the number of people on the registries divided by the number of people who are of age to donate, and I don't know how good they are about cleaning the list of people who have, say, died or moved out of the state and registered elsewhere. So I think there's a big group of people who have not yet registered as organ donors. And I'll talk to you about how we think about that decision. So it's important to understand how people become deceased donors. As I mentioned, they have to die in a way that makes the organs viable for transplant. There's two ways that people sort of have their organs consented to donate. One is that they make a decision, mostly at state departments of motor vehicles, where they say, yes, I want to be on my state's registry. If I die, the doctors can look me up, they can see I'm an organ donor, and they can alert my next of kin that they're going to begin the process of removal of my organs after I'm dead. There's another, and when we say that 48% of people are registered, we mean they're registered on their state's registry. The other way that individuals can become organ donors is after they're dead, their next of kin can say, yes, we would like to we consent to donation of the organs of this deceased person, and that's a decision that gets made by surviving next of kin. So when we think about getting people to register as organ donors, we're thinking about this question, but we recognize that when we influence this question, we also have the second source that we have to keep in mind. Are we going to affect what next of kin say among the people, for example, who are not registered? Oh, I should add as well, if you have questions at any point, please interrupt, because I'm going to, yeah.
You also have to worry about what the next of kin say when someone is registered.
Yes, so that's sort of an interesting intersection between a legal question and sort of a medical ethics question. So by current law, I believe in every state, or almost every state, this opting in on the registry is a legally binding decision. So the doctors, in some sense, have the right to remove regardless of what the next of kin say. In practice, if the next of kin put up a fight, the doctors may decide that they just are going to defer to the family, and that we might think that that's a good decision. But that is sort of an issue that I don't think there's a clear answer on. The conversation that the doctors have with the next of kin is very different, is my understanding, when the person is registered or not. When they're registered, the doctors say, so-and-so is an organ donor, we're going to begin the process, let me tell you about it. Whereas when they're not a donor, they have to say, I'm so sorry for this tragic loss, let's try to find a silver lining, let me tell you about organ donation, and it's more of a sell that they have to do, as opposed to just informing them that they're going to start the process and hoping they don't get a, wait a second, I never heard about that kind of response. Other questions? All right, so let me tell you about the experiment where we're going to look at organ donor registrations. So we're going to recruit subjects into the laboratory for an experiment. This is in Massachusetts at Harvard. So when they're recruited, they're told they're going to need a Massachusetts ID card. So this is either a driver's license, a learner's permit, or a state ID card. And they're told that they're going to need the last 4 digits of their social security number to participate in the study. They're not told that the experiment is about organ donation. But when they arrive to the laboratory, then they're told the reason they need this identification in the last 4 of their social is that they're going to be logging into the Massachusetts Organ and Tissue Donor Registry. They're going to have the opportunity in our study to change their actual organ and tissue donor status in Massachusetts. Then they're going to take a survey. So just to give you a sense, if the website that the subjects are going to, if they went on their own directly to the site, they would see this screen. All right, so this is the license permit ID, their name, their date of birth, the last 4 of their social, and an email address so that they can get a confirmation if they change their status. In our study, they're going to enter in the same information, but we're going to control the interface that they interact with. So in fact, in our study, they're going to enter the same information, but we're going to strip it away from the Massachusetts RMV website context, and we're going to be able to control experimentally the wording of the question that they answer when they decide whether or not they want to change their status. So what are we going to vary using our interface? Well, so we're interested in we're interested in 2 questions. I'll show you the variation that we use. We're particularly interested in the framing of the question from both an opt-in frame and a yes-no frame. We describe what these are. In an opt-in frame, people are prompted to check a box or in some states sign on a line to indicate their willingness to join the registry. In a yes-no frame, the question that is posed about organ donation has a positive and a negative response. So it might say, do you want to be an organ donor? In some states, the form just says organ donor ? And the options are yes and no, and you have to check one for that question to be considered complete when you hand in the form. This was an interesting question to us because the vast majority of policy changes in recent years are of the form, how do we ask the question, what is the specific wording that we use on these DMV forms? So the UK and some US states recently, very publicly, in New York, for example, through legislation, changed the way in which the organ donor question is asked from an opt-in frame to a yes-no frame. And we looked through all the DMV records that we could get, forms that we could get, and out of the 49 states and the District of Columbia that we were able to get, 41 have a yes-no frame at the DMV. So this is a big policy change. And here, let me show you the change in California. This was question 7 before July 1st, 2011. All right, so there's 2 boxes here, but one is actually, yes, I want to be an organ and tissue donor. The other one is another opt-in for making a $2 donation. So this is an opt-in frame where the only answer you can give about organ donation is yes, or you can leave it blank. What happened when they switched to a yes-no frame? They added, my yes, add my name to the donor registry, and I do not wish to register at this time. And now, if one of these 2 is not checked when you hand in your form, then the DMV officer can say to you, you haven't answered question 7, please make a selection there. All right, so we were interested in this question of the framing because of these policy changes and because most states do this, and we're not aware of any empirical evidence supporting this change for actual organ donor registration decisions. So in our experiment, subjects are going to see the request to change their organ donor status. It's going to be a 2x2 design. And one of these two manipulations is going to be whether it's an opt-in or a yes/no frame. We're also going to change the information that they're provided about organ donation to see if we, to benchmark this effect, if there is an effect of the yes/no frame on an effect of some other intervention that we might think will affect decisions. All right, so let me show you what these 4 treatments are. If you were to go to the Massachusetts registry and fill in the information that I showed you previously, this would be, and you were not currently a donor, this is the screen you would see. No, I'm not an organ and tissue donor in the organ and tissue donor registry, and you can change your status or keep it the same. What they see in our study is one of the 4 randomly generated treatment screens. This is an opt-in with no list, so this is going to be when they're asked as an opt-in frame, I want to register as an organ and tissue donor as a checkbox. They can check it and continue, or if they continue without checking the box, they will not be registered. Contrast this with the yes/no frame, where it says, please select one of the following options, and it's I want to register or I do not want to register. And if they try to press continue without checking one of those 2 boxes, there'll be an error message, please check one of the 2 to continue. And then I said we varied the information content. So here we have an opt-in with a list of the organs that are donated upon death of your organ donor. And again, we vary whether with the list, whether there's an opt-in or a yes/no frame. All right, so these are the 4 treatments that subjects are going to see. I've shown you all of them for the guys who are not registered when they start our experiment. In fact, a bunch of our subjects are registered when they come in. So they're going to be asked about removing themselves from the registry in the opt-in, or they're going to be asked the yes/no question like the guys that are not currently donors. We were reassured by the fact that we had 42.4% of our subjects that were previously donors, because that was very close to the Massachusetts average. The other almost 58% of subjects who were not donors, I want to point out, they had gone to the Massachusetts DMV or RMV to get a license that we asked them for in the study. And in Massachusetts, when you get any of these cards, you get asked about becoming an organ donor. So all of the people had been asked already if they wanted to be an organ donor, and they all did, none of them indicated yes. Yeah?
So I'm sorry if you already mentioned this, but were they experiencing a nudge at the point that they chose whether or not to be donors?
In Massachusetts, they were, so depending on when so Massachusetts is one of these where it was opt-in for a while, and then, when we look now, it's a yes/no question. And I don't know when they got their license. So they were asked in one of the 2 ways, and these guys have not said yes to that, or did not say yes to that question. Did not ask them. Okay, so I'm going to show you for the 4 treatments that I just described, I'm going to show you the probability that they were registered at the end of the study. I'm going to show you that first for the guys that came in registered. There were 156 of them, all but 2 of them, one here and one here, remained on the registry. So we're not losing a ton of people by asking the current registered donors if they want to change their status. What about the guys who come in and they're not registered? Let's look first at the opt-in. So we're getting 25 or 40% of them to say, yes, I'll join the registry in the opt-in frame. We're getting slightly higher for the list when we include the information about the other organs. And so the question is, there's California and these other states that have switched to the yes/no wording of the question, what kind of effect do we see in our study for that change? And it's a directionally negative, but not significant effect. So our data suggests that this yes/no frame is not driving lots more registrations. And in fact, the sample sizes are not huge because it turned out to be quite hard to get the subjects we needed. It took me 20 months of laboratory sessions to get 212 non-donors in the study. It turned out we just didn't have as many Massachusetts ID holders as we thought in the subject pool. But we can rule out with some confidence that yes/no is not doing better than opt-in. Right? With a one-sided test, we can say, yeah, these 2 bars are not higher than these 2 bars. All right, so what are the takeaways from this experiment with actual organ donor registrations? Well, the paper's called Don't Take No for an Answer, and there's 2 reasons for that. Right. The first one is No, don't take no for an answer. These people who had said no previously, when we asked them do they want to change their registration, ignoring the treatment variation, we get 29% of them to say yes, they'd join the registry. And that contrasts with only 1% of donors who asked to remove themselves. So, a policy takeaway is let's ask these people more frequently, not just every 5 or 8 years when they come back to renew their license, depending on the rules of the state. There's another don't take no for an answer, though, and that's the don't take no for an answer. We don't find that the yes-no framing does better than the opt-in framing. And in fact, it may do worse. And as I said, we can only statistically say that it's not doing better, right? But there's a concern that if this is the direction of policy, we're not seeing a big impact, right? We might want to rethink that policy change. I'm going to, very briefly, I'll mention that one of the things I think that's driven the desire to change the policy towards yes-no is work on hypothetical choices by Johnson and Goldstein, where they find that a yes-no question about organ donation in a hypothetical choice works better than opt-in. So there's a question of why we contrast. One is where we have real decisions versus hypothetical decisions, but I think another very important point is that in their data, sort of the only data available on this kind of question, is that when they switch from opt-in to yes-no, they're also switching the underlying default. They're describing states where the default is nobody's a donor, do you want to join, versus a state where you come in and there is no default, do you want to be a donor, yes or no. So in Massachusetts, if you're not on the registry, you're not on the registry. We're just changing how the question is asked, and the yes-no doesn't change the default of it being an opt-in registry state. So very briefly, I'll show you results from California, where we did an empirical analysis of the policy change, the change that I described with the pictures in 2011. We looked at quarterly registration rates in California. Fortunately, the change was made in between the second and third quarter of the year, so we have a nice break in the policy at between 2 quarters. And we're going to use a control group of all the other states from which I was able to get data, for which data is available by quarter for registration rates. So we're going to compare California, and this is the 3 quarters before their policy change and the 3 quarters after. And the percentage is, so that I can compare my control group with California, the registration rate is a percent of the rate in the quarter ending right when the policy change happened. So already we're not optimistic about the effect of the policy change because we see that there's a drop right here where the question goes from opt-in to yes-no. It gets worse when we add the 25 states as a control group because it's not like there's a secular trend where starting in July 2011, people are donating less across the country. In fact, there's sort of a natural upward trend that California is losing out on. So I'll spare you the tables, but we're estimating about 2 to 3% decrease in registration rates as a result of this policy change. But there's a second issue with the taking no for an answer that I want to leave you with, and that's this issue of the next of kin decision. Okay, so I said there's 2 ways that we get organ donors. We get them from the people who opt in, and then we ask the next of kin, in particular about the people who are not registered, and I want to investigate that as well. Yeah?
So for the empirical result regarding the change in California, did you look at how the registration happened? So if it was a renewal or if it's a new license, and whether or not that happened online or something like that?
So the data that we have by quarter is just it's reported from the DMV to Donate Life America, and they're reporting the quarterly data. So I don't have sort of broken down by specific groups, and I certainly don't have that for the other states as well. All right, so let me very briefly tell you about the follow-up study we did on Mechanical Turk about this next of kin question. We had subjects read a vignette about a hypothetical individual who had died, and they were told that the next of kin was asked about organ donation, and all they know about the organ donation decision of the person who died was what they saw on this screen. And we either showed them our opt-in or our yes-no screen, and we either told them that the deceased checked the box and ended up registered, or in this case left the box blank and was not registered. In the case of the yes-no, they were not registered because they checked, I do not want to register. Now the question is, for each combination of screen and selection by the deceased, should the next of kin donate the organs of the deceased? So that's what the subject is being asked to report. And the sort of key takeaway, we asked them in all 4 screens in a random order. So I'll just show you the results from the first question they were asked, so the between subject variation, but the same pattern for the within and between. If the person is registered, it doesn't matter which frame they were registered under. The hypothetical, the subjects say the next of kin should donate the organs for people who are registered. What about for the people who were not registered? Well, now the individuals on Mechanical Turk say the next of kin should donate the organs more often if the person was unregistered just because they didn't check the box, as opposed to they're not registered because they explicitly selected no. Right? And as I said, this replicates when we use all the data that we have. And so what's the takeaway here? It's that there might be a secondary effect of asking a yes-no question, and that's when next of kin are making decisions about somebody who's not on the registry, they might think that the no is sort of a stronger no than when the person just didn't opt in. And so combined with not increasing registration rates, it makes us question whether switching to the yes-no frame is the right policy move. I'm certainly out of time, so thank you very much, and we'll go to the next one.